All right, we are live, and I am excited to talk about how to tap into your inner Patrick Mahomes. I've actually done a little bit of this talk before, but I've used Tom Brady as an example. But Patrick Mahomes, I don't know for how many people watch the Super Bowl. I know how many people because you got ratings, it's millions.
Yeah.
But man, it seemed like when things got really pressure and it looked like the Chiefs were certainly going to lose that game, that second half was just a masterpiece. And Patrick Mahomes seems so calm and poised, and it's incredible, in a game that is, really violent and amazing at the same point.
Yeah.
The ability to stay calm when you're, and I think he was even injured at one point with his ankle and looked like he was pretty gimpy there. So what I want to talk about is the dynamics that allow athletes certainly to accomplish that. But then how do we achieve that, in our everyday life? How do we start to tap into that radical resilience in ourselves that allows us to stand in the pocket of life when things are really challenging? And I think we're in challenging times, right? I think we're heading into even more challenging times as market conditions change and recession is upon us. The people who are radically resilient are the ones that are going to get through these tough times the best, right? It allows them to stay agile and to find opportunities to grow. And the people around them, their family, their employers, their team, they need you to be radically resilient, right?
Yeah.
They need, because if you start to panic and you start to buckle under that weight of uncertainty, right, everybody else is going to feel it, and it's going to create panic that spreads. And that's where things, fold. Whereas if you can stay and it's like, exactly what tools, what mindset, what values help bring that robust, radical resilience out of you, all of a sudden, and everybody around you feels that, it's amazing how that allows you to keep your head up and lead your family team to victory. So, Mr. David Osk, what do you think about this concept of radical resilience?
I love this topic. And I think that, when someone doesn't feel resilient, you can describe that emotion or that state of mind and heart, right? Of feeling stuck or afraid or scared or paralyzed.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of internalizes, everybody a bit differently. As you were talking, I was thinking about, in movies or in our own lives, when someone walks into a room and they give a bit of a speech, or even they say a phrase, or they say it in a way that is, just powerful, and it causes something in us to shift. And I just so love the kind of this paradigm that resilience requires, a state of being stuck, right? It's and we've all been there, and we're all going to be there. It's not a matter of if we feel the need to be resilient, it's when. And I like it's like joy requires sadness, that kind of thing. But resilience is not a word that is often I don't know, really, talked about on some level. It's kind of there, but I feel like that even to say the word resilience to me just sounds kind of awesome. It's like, it makes me want to stand up here, sitting on a stool at my standing desk. And when I say the word resilience, I'm like, oh man, let's go. It just feels good. And but I think on a basic level, we just have to acknowledge that resilience requires feeling stuck, and it's okay to feel stuck, but it is not okay to stay there.
Yeah, it's good. Good
And
point.
so anyway, just a little philosophical tee up there.
Love that. And using the term radical resilience, there's a similar concept when we talk about radical resilience, known as anti-fragility,
Yeah.
right? And I was tempted to use that term, but I feel like it's even less of a used or understood concept. But anti-fragility is like taking resilience to a whole new level, where it says not only are you able to persevere and kind of grit your way through difficult times, but you actually are able to grow. You get better. And I
Yeah.
think, in the book around anti-fragility, it uses the term of the black box thinking in regards to the airplane industry, right?
Sure.
And how they have black boxes in airplanes. So every time that a plane goes down, unfortunately it's catastrophic, but they recovered the black box. They were able to figure out what went wrong, and they've constantly made improvements to the point now where airline travel is arguably one of the safest, ways to travel. And
Yeah.
so,
I love that. It's like, how can we become resilient? It's let's really work at it. What a like a masterful effort to put it. This is I've never really thought of it like that, right? What are they doing with that box that's indestructible? They're putting data, they're putting, the tools, they're putting the building blocks inside something that is, virtually indestructible, so that they don't, suffer those catastrophes. That's a really powerful, kind of a metaphor for, we as humans, because we want to be that way, right? I want to take those crashes, I want to take those bumps and bruises and assimilate that gold, that strength, that wisdom in a way that just feels really, really, really resilient, really powerful.
Yeah, love that. You're getting me even more excited. This topic. One of the things that motivated me to really want to lean into this concept of radical resilience is remembering what happened in 2008. And at that time, I had taken on a little extra work at a psychiatric hospital. I just bought a house with my wife, and wasn't sure what was going to happen with the economy, and that's where I'd done my internship. So. Yeah. And we had a really consistent kind of demographic, a patient population at the hospital, and it was generally people who had really severe, significant, constant psychopathology. But we saw this shift in 2008, where all of a sudden we saw this, kind of a small percentage, but of people who were very high functioning, had been very successful, but their identity was so anchored and attached to their success and to the money that they were making, that when suddenly the market conditions changed and what was working for them no longer did, they just rigidly kept trying to do the same thing over and over again, even though it clearly wasn't working. Yeah. And they didn't have the resilience, certainly the anti-fragility, to be able to pivot. And oftentimes, if they just had the flexibility, right, to be able to see a full range of potential options or solutions, they could have pivoted in a way where their business could have grown, they could have survived and even thrived, right? And so what I feel really motivated to do is, how do we help equip people that they can start to give really clear, specific language to the things that bring out radical resilience in them? So as things get tougher, they're going to get even tougher than that, right? Like, they're going to rise up, they're going to find a mindset, they're going to find beliefs, they're going to find the support and coping, tools and strategies that allow them to handle this in a way where they can grow.
Man, I love that. All of us, have these things in our lives that we're willing to, to fight for. This is a little bit of a curveball, but I heard this comedian the other day. He said, my wife and I had our firstborn. It was a little boy, and he's holding his little boy for the first time, looking at him, and he thought to himself, man, I would die for you. And then their second born was a girl, and he's holding her, and he said, I'd kill for you. And what's fascinating though is there are causes, and there are people, and there are convictions that we believe in.
Yes.
That we're willing to fall on the sword over. I mean, we're willing to take up the sword for, we're willing to fight for. But what's fascinating is what if we, come across a very real obstacle in our lives? For instance, marriage, right? You've had months of chaos in your marriage and so on, and you're willing to die for that person. You're willing to fall on that sword. But at the same time, you don't have the tools. You've never been, you don't know what you are bringing to the table that is unique to you. You've got all the passion in the world, right? That's why the sparks are flying, because there's something wrong and you're willing to do anything. But yet you are ill-equipped. You are lacking in your ability to walk into that situation with wisdom and courage and tools and that kind of thing. And so I think this idea of being resilient, there's an understanding and a wisdom and, i.e. tools and how to use those tools, right? That have to come alongside that in a very practical way. And if we can say we're resilient because we have all this emotion, but guess what? If you don't have the tools, you can emote all you want, but it's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, so true. And, I think we all have the tools necessary. And I think part of what you're getting at, and it's brilliant, is like how do we start to access this? How do we give a name to them?
Yeah.
And how do we do that in a way where we predetermine, right? So we've established this in advance, trying to build or establish, radical resilience, the tools and the muscles in that when you're in the midst of really, really stressful, hard times is like trying to learn how to ride a bike in the middle of a hurricane, right? Like just not a great idea.
Yeah.
So if you can start to build the tools and create the foundation now, that when things get tougher, then you're already prepared. Much like Patrick Mahomes, part of how you build the ability to stay poised and calm under pressure is because he's been there before, right? He's been in those moments. I'm sure there's times where he, folded, but gradually he starts to pull on his memory bank of times that he stood in the pocket, right? He stayed calm and he found his outlet receivers and, was able to lead the team downfield. And so one of the things I think is really essential to building radical resilience is recognize you don't just have to pull resilience in the moment. You can borrow resilience from the past, right? You can remember times that you grew through really difficult times and pull on that, like what that felt like, what strengths you built and help that to create resilience in the present and in the future. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. And that it's the borrowing wisdom, borrowing courage, borrowing that whatever that moment is that you can assimilate, from the past. I've been through so many situations. It was funny. This week we had a meeting lined up with a, really large billion-dollar corporation. And in the past, I'd be, kind of sweating it and a little bit nervous, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And on a very basic level, right? I've been through enough seasons in life and enough meetings like that I know how to handle this. I'm resilient in this moment. I'm not going to I didn't in the past, by the way, I might not have even slept last night. And even tonight I would have been like, man, I wonder what's going to happen, all that kind of stuff. And the resilience, because I've done a little bit of the deep work and I was willing to stay in the game and, not to toot my own horn, but I wasn't willing to give up, just to stay in the hunt. There's definite, past boulders and stuff that I can bring with me to stand on that really, help me in very, very real circumstances in life.
And love that. And love both the pulling on of experience and wisdom, but also, I know having gone on some of this journey, with you, the most resilient people I know are people that have a clear understanding of who they are, right? Their identity is sitting on a firm foundation of being secure in who they are. They know what they value, so they are able to prioritize in real time, right? The things that matter. Because it's easy, just like what they know with pilots, when an airplane starts to, malfunction and all of a sudden your adrenaline's pumping, it's easier. You get tunnel vision and you kind of can lock on to the first thing that you see, the first solution.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not able to break out of that, sometimes that solution's like right there. It's outside your purview, but you're so locked on to seeing things a certain way that all of a sudden it ends up having catastrophic consequences. So the people who respond best to really difficult, stressful situations, they have the ability to prioritize in real time what really matters. What are the things I really need to focus on so that I'm able to rise up and meet the moment? And that comes from having determined what those are. Right. And
the identity. When you mentioned, the word identity, right? When you've identified those things that are your core convictions, the lens at which you're making decisions through, your strengths, the impact that you want to have, you you walk into a day or a moment or a conversation with, just not that big question mark. And we've all felt that.
Yeah.
You walk into a room and you're nervous and you shrink, and people, you feel it, they see it. As opposed to, I don't have all the answers, right? And that's okay. But guess what I do know? I know that, if these types of situations arise, I've already predetermined how to handle those things. I'm not going to be, a man who's just blowing in the wind, trying to get the approval of others, that kind of stuff. If something weird happens, I know I'm going to say yes to and no to, and there's just not that uncertainty and feel like you're just kind of blowing in the wind. And I think that the predetermining is everything. If you've not done that work, if you've not answered those questions, you can just as well throw resiliency right out the window, because you're going to be blowing in the wind just like everybody else.
Yeah. So true. I know so many people that talk about, well, I can be resilient. But then you ask them, well, what is it that brings out the resilience in you? Can you tell me that? And they have this vague, ambiguous sense, right? Much like oftentimes when I talk about people with their values, it's like, yeah, I know what my values are. Well, okay, what are they? And well, I mean, I have a vague sense of what they are. Well, how are you able to live those out with great clarity and, radical commitment if they're really vague and undefined?
Yeah.
Same thing with your resilience. If it's not clearly defined with really specific, clear language, then the chances that you're going to be able to pull on that when you need it most is really unlikely.
So I love that. And so maybe to give a real life example here. So, my number 2 core value is the word inspire, right? The word inspiration. Man, I love saying it. I love thinking about it. I love being it. I like, imparting that. It means to breathe life into, right? And you're the one who's helped me to really understand that about myself. So what I think is kind of fascinating, it's not that inspiration doesn't need to be only this negative side of life will get me back to zero. I mean, it's or resilience. I mean, if resilience really can be, you know what, I'm not necessarily satisfied with a mediocre life. And to get on that plus side can be kind of scary. And I need some fuel to swing for the fence. So even in that moment, right, you're okay, I'm doing fine. I'll just settle right here. And, okay, I'm not on the minus side. But I think the resilience piece in us, can go to that, can help us get to that positive side where we live, a bit more of an extraordinary life. And we don't just kind of, settle into things. And for me personally, right, that's why, like, when I think about that, it's because I've embraced my core value of inspiration. Like, I don't want to live just this mediocre, okay, I'm doing the 9 to 5, working at the grocery store, and I'm gonna just kind of, fade off into the sunset. I want to have a life of impact. I want to have a life of joy and trips. And, I'd like to have 1,000 people at my funeral, one day who are like, man, that son of a gun, he put more wind in my sail than I ever thought possible. And he was genuine and kind, and he believed in me and that kind of stuff. So I think resilience is not just this idea of, okay, I made it through it, and now I'm waiting for the shoe to drop, right?
Yeah.
No. It's like, get out of my way. I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint the rest of this night and tomorrow and the rest of this week in a way that is just good and powerful and courageous. And,
man, love that. And I love, because, it's really talking about too, is like being resilient in the right things, being resilient. Because I was interviewed once and someone asked me the question, is it possible to ever be like too resilient? And it seems, counterintuitive.
That's a funny question.
Right. I mean, and I thought, I was like, well, yeah, there's people out there that are choosing to just be stubborn and resilient, but they're doing it in things that really either don't matter, or areas that sometimes it is best to say, you know what, I'm going to let go of this so I can pursue something better. Right. I'm going to choose something that's more aligned with, my purpose, my calling. But again, you got to know what these things are, and you have to have the fluidity, the mental agility in the moment to not just be really rigid and stuck. So how are you able to stay agile?
Yeah. What if you're resilient in the things that, somebody you admire or your parents defined for you as success, and you're just beating some drum because you think you should, as opposed to something that feels really, really good in your own heart because you've taken ownership of it. I love that, Andy. What if you're resilient in the wrong place? I think that's a really great question to ask.
I love it. I know I got a chance to interview John Lee Dumas, JLD, at one point.
Yeah.
And in his story, he was in the military, and after he got out, he was looking to start a career and got into law school. And first semester in, right, chose to realize that wasn't where he wanted to be resilient. I think his dad had been a lawyer, and realized that he could make good money, but very quickly pivoted. Then he got a job working in real estate, I think it was, or business, was making good money. Sure. He hated it, right? Felt like every day he was a hamster on the wheel, kind of going. But he would hear these podcasts on the way to work, and he loved listening to them. And he thought to himself, there's not really somebody at that point that was doing daily content, for people driving to work, that it would be like a cup of coffee, something that would just inspire people, right? They would feel more charged and alive, and have better options. And so he started creating that content. And because he was, lit up and felt, passion which I love the word passion, right? It comes from that notion of suffer. It's something we're willing to suffer for and like, to go through. So even though he wasn't making money and it was a struggle, and there were several times that I'm sure he felt the desire to quit, there was no way he was going to give up, right? Because he felt that strong sense of purpose and passion that compelled him to rise above. And eventually, I mean, he's a mega successful podcaster at this point.
I just wrote down that suffer and passion. That's something that I think is absolutely, if you're willing to suffer for something. I mean, a lot of people can say I'm passionate about something. Then when the going gets tough, right? When the suffering kind of hits and the hard stuff hits, man, then they fizzle out. And I think that, the idea of being resilient in the right things would really beg the question then, what are you willing to suffer for?
Yeah.
Man, that really clarifies things in a hurry. I love that. I'm actually put that on a Post-it note. I'm going to keep that front and center here. I love that.
I love how you reiterate sometimes something too. It's like I say something, you reiterate. I'm like, man, that sounds really good. I think another thing that is key, and we can use the Patrick Mahomes a metaphor or analogy or whichever one that is, but that you don't have to go through tough times alone, right? If you really want to be resilient, choosing to do that in isolation is a terrible idea. You will not be radically resilient in isolation. Right. That doesn't mean that you can't go through difficult things and you can't grit your way through it. But if you want to tap into your deepest resilience, where you're really able to grow and thrive, right? You gotta have a tribe. Patrick Mahomes knows where his tools are. He knows he's got teammates. He knows that they're in it together. They're all in a common pursuit, right, to win a Super Bowl. So being able to define, hey, who's in my tribe? Who are those people that I can rely on? Who are those people that, right, I don't have to, and there's crazy research out there that when we're highly stressed and we feel supported, not only does it have a physical cardiovascular benefit to it versus trying to go through that alone, which is really bad for you, but we feel more hope, right? We start to feel like I can do this. And that is critical to tapping into radical resilience.
I love that idea that, the author, right, that made authenticity is writing this story that involves so many characters, and our stories are so woven together. And it's, so for all of us to have, that community, right? We were made for it. And it's it's like standing in the, on a basic level, right? It's standing in front of, like this last summer, we went to Italy, and you're standing in front of the famous statues and so on. Can you imagine if you were standing there by yourself, but when you're standing with someone, right? It's that joy is doubled. It's like, and especially when there is a sense of fear or something like that, when you're standing with someone else, especially someone you've chosen, right? Your tribe, the fear is cut in half. Just their presence alone, you're not standing alone.
Yeah.
And, and then also, of course, those same people, when you have shared with them those things you're willing to suffer for, I think that they are then able to, more equipped to encourage you in a way that is meaningful and not, not generic, but very, very tied to your authenticity.
Yeah, love that. I mean, I love the idea, even that, the research that when you share an idea, right, you've got a purpose, you got a big goal in mind. The first person you share that with, their reaction has a huge effect on whether or not you end up pursuing that, right?
Right.
So if you're sharing a big goal in the midst of hard times, and you share with someone that pours a bucket of water as a wet blanket on that, right? It's tough to remain radically resilient. So again, just knowing who's in your tribe and using awareness to say, who are the people that are going to help me to, find. Now, do we need people sometimes that give us really honest feedback? Absolutely. But just, again, that's where it's really great to know who's in my tribe and what are the different roles that people fill and bring to this that empower me to rise above really difficult times. A concept is known as inner locus of control. That's another huge component of being radically resilient. Right. When we get really stressed, and again, I haven't spoken specifically with Patrick Mahomes, but I'm sure if he was overly focused on things he had no control over in the midst of really difficult times, his mind would be in the wrong place. Right. It would actually shut down the motivation center of his brain. And so the more you're able to focus, well, the things I can control is how I respond to this moment. Right. I can focus on, leaning into my character strengths. I can focus on taking certain decisive action And that's where all of a sudden we start to feel more of a sense of autonomy. We start to feel then, more motivation, and we break it down into little small steps of how we can rise above and what we can do to move forward in the face of uncertainty and challenges. So, but the notion of defining what you can control and taking action on that is so critical to resilience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that, and this is probably a discussion for another day, but resilience looks like something. So then, one of the ways that I was really enlightened when I, went through your blueprint was to understand the difference between a value and a virtue. Right. So the idea of resilience looking like something is really a virtue. I'm anchoring, predetermining to a value, but the outcome looks like something. And so it's interesting is I, again, we live in a broken world, and a lot of days I'm a real knucklehead. But when I am present, when I'm mindful, and I decide, this is the type of impact that I want to have on people. Again, predetermining, right? A lot of times, if I think about my core values of, inspire, community, beauty, impact, wisdom, it's a great thing to know when I walk into a room or a conversation. And I actually had 3 conversations today with people that had a big question mark, before I got there. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I had predetermined, right, to leave them with more wind in their sail than I found them. And someone else, right, who may have a different value of, like, imparting some wisdom, or being somebody who's helpful, or being someone who brings, like you always talk about for yourself, like, I want to be the calmest person here. I want to bring, stability to this place, and so on. And I love that, right? We're all so unique. But again, if you don't know what that is, it's like, there's that question mark. You feel it, they feel it, and you're not as effective, and you're not as happy. And I feel like with all of this too, Andy, I'm like, I'm doing this because I want to be happier. I want to have a more joyful, fulfilled life. And I actually wrote it on a Post-it, here last year. Like, I'm a joy-seeking missile, like a heat-seeking missile, right?
Love it.
And this is the gateway to that. And to have a void in this area and gaps in this area, you're never going to find it.
Yeah, so good. And how deflating is it? Or I don't know, maybe a better way to ask this question is that when things get really stressful and you get overly focused on the things you can't control, right? Maybe someone did something that was really crappy, right? They undermined you, or, I know you've had a few of this recently where someone, did something in regards to an idea you've had. But the more you focus on the thing you can't control, you focus on, how maybe you've been victimized, not to say that you haven't sometimes, but you focus on circumstances. How resilient do you feel the more you're focused on those things?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's your focus. I mean, you're going to be, feeling, if you will, whatever you're focused on. I mean, here's the crazy thing, right? It's like, if you haven't predetermined, you can't focus on resiliency. There's no option. You have one option, and that's to look at all the insecurity and all the uncertainty and just wring your hands and, boy, I hope it turns out right, as opposed to get out of my way. Right?
That's right.
I am David Osk. Hear me roar. It sounds kind of over the top, but not really. It's like, wait a second. Like, you actually coached me on this months ago, and I used it with my daughter last week. Resiliency looks like this. I'm David Osk. I'm just the man for the job. Of course there's going to be problems. My daughter used that a couple of weeks ago when she was down at Vanderbilt auditioning, with her violin. She walked out there and she thought to herself, I'm just the woman for the job, right?
So love it.
Cute little thing is 16 years old, but it's the foundation of resiliency. And it breeds not only courage in your own life, but boy, you start using that language with people around you, it's contagious. It's like, oh no, I'm just the man for the job. Get out of the way. I love challenges. I love obstacles. I'm going to expect them. And much of my life, I was like, oh no, not another one. And once in a while, I'm there, right? I can be a little whiny baby, but at the same time, I'm like, no, not today. Let's tackle this one head on.
Love it, right? I mean, everything about that, and the idea of being able to trust yourself in the moment to say no, right? I'm just the person, right? To rise up and be the hero, little h, right, of this moment, is because you know what tools you bring to that moment, right?
Right.
Because you know what strategy, like you were saying, me being the calmest person in the room. That's one of the things when I go into difficult moments, I intentionally kind of lower my breath rate, lower my pulse going into something so I can stay more calm. I also try and have fun in everything that I do, right? So I keep things light and I bring a sense of creativity and playfulness to moments. Like when I get up and speak in front of huge audiences, that used to absolutely terrify me. But now I go into it really embracing that sense of like, let's have fun with this. Let's go
Yeah.
out there and really make this fun. And
Mm.
because I've determined, right, that this is what is important to me, and I have a strategy that I apply that's unique to me, right, it allows me to meet these moments and really feel like I got this, right? And
Oh man.
I know what impact I want to have on the people out in the crowd, much like you do with your amazing thing on inspiration, right? Bringing goosebumps to people's goosebumps.
I love it. I stole that from like a Nissan commercial or something, but to give people's goosebumps. But really, truth of the matter is I've been that way my whole life, right? It's not like I decided to just choose these things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you go through your blueprint, right, you ask really powerful questions so that they just naturally rise to the top. And now I'm like, I have a vocabulary to describe those things that make me, that make me different from the
Yeah.
person next to me. And when I just simply operate in that vein, man, just fear tends to just, lessen, joy starts to rise, courage rises, uncertainty, out the window. And I mean, it's amazing the practical sense of this, which in the past used to seem kind of, I don't know, a little bit woohoo and lofty to me, but nope, it's quite practical. And when families, parents start operating in this way, when organizations start operating in this way, and it's that trickle down effect,
Yeah.
you feel it. The internal culture, produces external culture, which is absolutely contagious.
I love it. You think about teams that have consistent sports dynasties.
Yeah.
It's because they have a coach and they have a system, a team that's got a clear sense of identity. That identity gives them a repeatable framework, right, to be consistently to actualize their full potential.
Sure.
That's what we're doing here, right? We're helping the people to create a specific set of self-awareness so that they're able to apply that self-awareness when it's needed most, right? And they're able to start to apply, what motivates and brings out the best in them, what their
Yeah.
purpose is, their passion, right? We start to give a name to these things. So, just like a team that plays to its strengths versus sometimes you hear a team that's got a load of talent on it, right? But they underperform, and you often hear they've got either no sense of identity or they've lost their sense of identity. They're
Yeah.
trying to be someone they're not,
Yeah.
and you're never going to reach your fullest radical resilience when you're doing something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
So,
that. It seems very, very practical, very crystal clear when you state it like that.
level we'll kind of wrap up. One of my favorite exercises, and getting ready to release a radical resilience challenge. It's just a 7-day process. These are the essential building blocks for radical resilience, right? And we intentionally kept the price, I think, super low because I want as many people as we're heading into tough times to be able to really tap into that radical resilience.
Yeah.
But there's an exercise where you create an affirmation, right? It's a mantra, a guiding principle, whatever you might want to call it. But when times get tough, and then you create a very specific, something that's unique to you, right? I lean into my faith, my curiosity, and my ability to adapt, right? To rise up, get lean, and grow, right? So, and I've walked enough people through this exercise now that they've said, man, I went through something really, really stressful the other day. And normally it creates a vicious cycle, right? I start to feel anxious. I feel scared. That creates a belief. Oh no, I don't have this. Something's going to go wrong. I start to avoid, and it creates a whole vicious cycle where you, instead of tapping into resilience, you cower, right? I've been there too many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead, they were able in that moment to pivot out of that kind of vicious cycle. And they were able to say, wait a minute, no, things are getting tough right now. But and they use their mantra in that to help them create a whole new type of loop, right? A feedback loop, virtuous loop, where they started to be like, no, wait, I got this.
Yeah.
Right. And they had a very specific set of strengths and a very specific direction they wanted to head in that pointed true north, right?
Yeah.
That allowed them to all of a sudden meet that moment that was radically resilient. So
Yeah.
I just look forward, right, to helping people tap into their radical resilience so that they can be their own Patrick Mahomes and whatever that might be in their life. If that's in your leading your family, if that's leading your business, but where you can stay in that pocket, right, and know, hey, I'm just the man or the woman for this moment to really be able to lead my team, my family, right, to victory, whatever that might mean for any given person. So,
Love it, man. Well said. Well said.
all right, brother. And as always, again, man, I love listening to you talk about some of these concepts. So just appreciate the conversation.
I learned it from you. So thank you.
All right. Good luck, everyone. I don't know why I say good luck. Not even luck, right? Be radically resilient.
That's right.